Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining us. And for this next hour that we spend together, we will be focusing on the event of the day. And that, of course, is the memorial service that took place for George Floyd in Minneapolis, the place where he was murdered by a police officer. And 4 police officers have now been charged with his murder. And we want to focus now, though, on the somber mood in Minneapolis as everyone came together to remember George Floyd, including his family members. His family members remembering him as someone they called not George, but Perry, the affectionate name that they called him, calling him a gentle giant, calling him someone who was always there to help others, stating that they were a family like many African-American families, large families, with little means, but a whole lot of love to spread and share with everyone. So in these opening observations, we focus on one thing. George Floyd, as they've stated today, should not have been in a funeral, but should have been alive. And that a failed criminal justice system led to his death. But George Floyd, as his family rightly pointed out, along with Ben Crump, the family attorney, and the Reverend Al Sharpton, the name George Floyd has now echoed across the world and has reverberated in so many people protesting against the injustice within the American criminal justice system as it relates to the pain inflicted upon African-American men, women, and children. And as so many people stated, enough is enough. It stops now. And those are my opening observations. Joining me now is a good friend, Dr. Joseph Castleberry. He is the president of Northwest University in Kirkland, Washington. That's just outside of Seattle. But today, he's joining me from the Trask Chapel at Northwestern University in Minneapolis, where he has been attending the memorial service for George Floyd. And Dr. Joseph Castleberry, tell me what the atmosphere is like there for you as a college president, seeing what's happening there in Minneapolis.
Well, the physical aspect is low key. There's, of course, a lot of security out front. There's television cameras and that kind of thing, and a few people are beginning to gather. It's still very early. The service doesn't start until 1. So there are not many people here in the chapel yet, but there's certainly a serious environment that, people realize the weight of circumstances that we're in as a nation and that we're facing, and the challenges ahead for us to take advantage of this moment to see God at work in our society to bring about the revitalization of the process that we saw with Dr. King. I was just watching this morning Dr. King's last Sunday sermon, and then the I Have a Dream speech from the Washington Mall, and I was reflecting on how we have seen lots of improvement in American life, much more prosperity than what Dr. King talked about in 1963 and 1968. We have seen advances, but yet there's a hold has been put on many aspects of the arc of justice. I mean, Dr. King said that the arc of justice bends towards, the arc of history bends towards justice. And it's time to bend it hard. It's long, but it bends towards justice. And, it's time for us to put all of our effort into achieving a more just society now. Take advantage of this opportunity.
You know, as a college president of an evangelical college, you've issued a challenge to leaders, for that matter, throughout the United States and the world, particularly white leaders, to come forward and break bread, and not just break bread, but develop relationships and bonds of trust and mutual admiration and respect for Black Americans and people of color. Tell me about your post on social media in that regard.
Well, several posts here lately. I think you might be talking about the blog post that I did about how I'm ashamed of my government that we have not kept our promise. If you look at the preamble of the American Constitution, it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity." We have not achieved that goal of our government's founding, and we have really got to get serious in our time about keeping those promises to ourselves. We don't have the kind of justice that our founders dreamed that we would have. We don't have the national unity that they founded this government to achieve. The country is more divided right now than at any time I've ever seen in my life. We've got to come together. We've got to overcome every kind of pettiness, every kind of partisan division, begin to work together for the best good that we can achieve. And that's going to mean compromise for sure. It's certainly going to mean listening to each other. I wrote in another post that if you don't have a conflict of loyalties, you don't have enough friends. I mean, the truth is, if you've got enough friends, they're going to be people that you disagree with in your body of friends, and that's the way it ought to be. We don't have to always agree with each other on everything. We do have to listen to each other, and when we listen to each other, we build trust, and that's probably the greatest thing lacking in black and white relationships among leaders today is that there's a lack of trust there, and I feel a tremendous burden and a tremendous calling to go first, to trust first, to love first, to open, reach out a hand of friendship and build relationships. It's at the level of those relationships among leaders, and I speak especially of pastors, but any kind of leader, any kind of institution of civil society or a government. We got to build relationships that we trust each other and that we can find common ground and we can find compromise that moves us forward. No one's ever going to achieve victory all in one fell swoop, but we don't have time to be hunkered down in corners of division.
You're watching the Kelly Wright Show. I'm talking to Dr. Joseph Castleberry, the president of Northwest University. We'll be back with more about his comments in attending today's memorial service for George Floyd right after this. Yeah, you're right. Hunkered down in corners of division when we should all be taking a seat at the table of brotherhood in order to find that common good by not only having dialogue, but breaking bread together, trusting each other with the meals that we serve. And the meals that I think we should be serving, Dr. Joe, are meals of love, of freedom, of peace, of justice, of knowledge, and going back to the preamble of the Constitution, or therefore the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain rights, rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I was struck by a conversation that you and I had prior to you coming on with me, and that's the fact that when you got into Minneapolis and you just felt a sense of not only somberness, but you also felt heartbreak. Tell me about what you felt in the atmosphere there.
Well, when I was driving into town, some people picked me up at the airport, and as we were driving through the neighborhood where the murder occurred, and they were pointing to scenes of devastation there, where the rage of the people had spilled over into, acts of rebellion, and it was understandable. I mean, you look at it and how could you not be angry? How could you not be angry? But you got to hand it to the people of Minneapolis. They are rebounding, and I think that this city is going to find a better future. This death can't be in vain. It just can't be in vain. And I think people's attention has been awakened, and I think people are willing to listen to each other. I think people are willing to work together, and I'm impressed with this city, impressed with its people, and there's a better day ahead. We can achieve it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and certainly there you're at an Assemblies of God church at an evangelical college there at North Central in the heart of Minneapolis. You're the president of Northwest University. You've dealt with people all from all walks of life, all over the world. Your students are Black, they're white, they're African, they're different nationalities. What's your sense of I mean, do you have a sense of pride for the young people that have peacefully protested and they're protesting all over the world now?
Oh, absolutely. You have to have respect for people who are peacefully standing up for what they believe in and demanding justice. You've got to respect that. You know, and I'm proud of my church. I mean, I'm not proud of some of the parts of our origin. The Assemblies of God was founded partly because there were white ministers in the South who could only get ministry credentials at the Church of God in Christ, which is an African American denomination, and they felt uncomfortable and they pulled out of that and joined others to found the Assemblies of God. It was founded as a white denomination, but today our denomination is now almost 50% uh, uh, people of color in the United States. Only it's a little bit more than 50% white, but almost 50% people of color here in the United States now. There's been a tremendous integration of the church. Dr. King said in his last Sunday sermon that Sunday morning was the most segregated hour in America. And I can tell you, it's not at our churches. It's there's a tremendous ethnic diversity, and we've come a long way in that way. And in that are the seeds of a better future. You know, there's a place for Black churches. The Black church is an important institution in our society that needs to grow stronger, not weaker. I think a lot of people are beginning to attend Black churches that from different ethnic groups and even white people. Every time I go to an African American church, I see a few white people in the congregation. We need to see more of that. We need to see more Black people in white congregations and all that. But I think that we see the seeds of a better day beginning to break out around us, and we need to throw gas on that fire. So we need to, you know, Dr. King said we need to meet physical force with soul force. And I'll tell you, it's soul force that's going to change our nation. It's us coming together in faith, you know, to work together to build that table of brotherhood.
You said this is more than a racial divide and more than a racial problem. We have a soul problem in America. It's a moral problem in America, and we must address it starting here, starting now. So I'm encouraged by you being the president of a college and one that I'm proud to have received my doctorate from. In full disclosure, I'm just so proud of the stance that you have taken, a leadership role to challenge other leaders, white leaders, presidents of colleges, pastors of churches, to come out and say enough is enough. Let's come together as the family of man.
Well, Kelly, I come to this with full knowledge that there's a lot to repent for. And, you know, it's, I just trust in the Lord and asking the Lord to help me fully repent for not being active enough in the past. And we've got to pour it on. This is our moment. This is the moment where we can see a mighty victory for justice in America, and let's push forward.
Before I let you go, what's your message to, and I know you care about all people, you've been a missionary, you've worked in some hot spots around the world, but what's your message to Black America from a white college president?
My message is, we hear you loud and clear. We hear you loud and clear, and we will not ignore. That's the simple message.
That's good. That's a good way to, you know, grace help us grow forward. I appreciate you, Dr. Joseph Castleberry. I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I'm delighted to have talked to you. I wish it was a better occasion.
Yes.
I know it's a somber moment for you, but you're there to show your support for the George Floyd family and for the countless of souls that are grieving and heartbroken by what we've seen happen in this country. We've got to turn it around. We've got to turn it around.
Kelly, keep the good news coming. I'm proud of your work.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, and be well. And I'll see you live tonight on Facebook as well after the show.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
God bless. Welcome back to the program. So now I'm talking to Jeff Boney, and he is a city council member in the Houston area. And Jeff, thanks for joining us on this program today. First of all, you've been through a lot, and we want to get to that in just a moment. But first, because it is today's memorial, the start of a memorial service for George Floyd there in Minneapolis, and then we'll go on to North Carolina, and then to Houston, where you are on Monday. I wanted to ask you what your connection is to George Floyd and your acquaintance with him.
Well, George Floyd and I happen to be a part of the illustrious alumni of Jack Yates High School. Jack Yates High School is a historic school founded in 1926 here in Houston, the second oldest Black high school in the city of Houston. We have a very, very close bond. Wherever we go across the United States and the world, there are Yates alumni. You got people like Roland Martin, Felicia Richard, Debbie Allen, all are graduates of Yates High School. So it's a very close-knit school, and we really embrace our legacy as alumni. And so I graduated from high school in 1991. George Floyd attended the school while he graduated in 93 from Yates a couple of years after me. And of course, I knew Big Floyd, and he was an excellent basketball player for Yates, as well as a football player, helping lead the high school team to the state championship in 1992. So he was very well known, not only in school, but in the community, growing up in CUNY Homes, which is right across from Yates. He was a staple in Third Ward, in the Third Ward community. He was a gentle giant and someone that everybody pretty much loved. I mean, it was hard to not love Big George.
I've often heard him described as Big George, the gentle giant, and that he could look imposing, and yet when you would talk to him, you would realize that he was this big teddy bear who wanted to help people. What do you recall about him reaching out to help people in his life?
Yeah, I mean, all of us have probably gone through various challenges in life, but one of the things that stands out to me is how he really wanted to change the community. I remember going back, one of his old teachers in second grade actually produced a essay that he had written in the second grade where he stated he wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. And, fast forward to him wanting to make a difference and an impact. I remember him actually working actively with a church in the CUNY Homes community, which is, area in Lodamod area in Houston in Third Ward. And he would bring out a baptism pool and drag that thing out, on the basketball court, man, and baptize kids and just try to encourage them to change their lives for the better. And so, he's always been that type of person. And, me being the president of the Jack Yates National Alumni Association, who represents the alumni of Jack Yates, I found it an honor, man, to have someone, be a part of the Jack Yates alumni family like Big Floyd, man, and others like him that care about the community. But, this is a solemn time. We're doing things to remember his life and legacy. I know that memorial service is going on in Minnesota, but we held some events here. The alumni did, as well as have some other things planned. We have a candlelight prayer vigil planned right before his memorial service here in Houston, which is going to be Tuesday. And we're going to be honoring his life and legacy at that time as well. But it's a very, very sad time, but it's also a time where we're working to remember his life and legacy and the great things about the contributions he made to not only Yates High School, but the community as a whole.
You're watching The Kelly Wright Show. We'll be back with more after this. That scene, none of us can forget about what happened that Monday when George Floyd left this earth, and the horrible way in which it happened. And it has sent shockwaves throughout the country and throughout the world. People all over the world are protesting. People all over the world are saying the name George Floyd. And it still hurts me as a Black man to see how we could be treated so callously and so coldly. But you're someone who had a close acquaintance with him, knowing him, watching him there in the Houston area. And how do we move forward from that pain that is still so heartbreaking for me, for other Black men, women, and children?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and you know what? It's an age-old question. It seems
Yeah,
that we always are asked these questions. I mean, you can go back from slavery when you had abolitionists asking how we can move forward past the stain of slavery, and then you had the Reconstruction area take place, and then the Klan rose its ugly head and started lynching African Americans and trying to stop them from voting and disenfranchising them. And then you fast forward to Jim Crow and the things that happened in the South with many of the deaths and murders that took place, Dr. King, Malcolm X, others. But then you think about how long we've been hearing about police brutality, and it's been in our songs, it's been in our music. Matter of fact, the hip hop community, wrote a lot of music, and it kind of really was birthed because of some of the challenges they were facing in the community. You had groups like Public Enemy. You had groups like NWA. You had people like Ice-T. They were talking about the issues that African Americans were facing dealing with the police. You had the Rodney King incident, and fast forward to not only police brutality but just brutality of African Americans. You had Trayvon Martin, and it is so sad to me that when you think about just two or so weeks before this happened to our good brother George Floyd, you see Ahmaud Arbery
yep,
was chased down and attacked by a group of Caucasian males who stated that he was trying to break into or steal from a construction site. And this just happened 2 weeks before. And so it's almost as if the name Ahmaud Arbery is kind of taking second fiddle to George Floyd. And what I want to do is, and I hope others do, is say enough is enough and stop the spread. Just like we talk about COVID-19, stopping the community spread. We need to, there's two viruses in this country right now attacking Black people and have been for some time. Well, at least now with the last several months, COVID-19, which is impacting the African American community, and racism and police brutality. Enough is enough, and you got to stop it. You got to stop the spread of this violence. You have someone at 1600 Pennsylvania that's inciting the violence. And so until individuals who are inflicting this pain and violence amongst the African American community, I think that when they decide that enough is enough from their perspective and their end, then we'll start to see some change. But it starts with it starts with acknowledging the issue and then addressing the issue. And I think a lot of that is starting to happen, but the proof is in the pudding, and a pair of lips will say anything.
Jeff Boney, I appreciate you, and I make no bones about it. I believe in the power of prayer, so I'm praying for you to
Thank
be
you.
totally healed, completely recovered, and to keep doing the great work that you're doing with with your work as a city council member and with your work as a journalist. Just know that you've always got a friend here. This is your platform. Use it.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it, and I receive that prayer. Thank you.
All right. God bless you. We'll be
God
back
bless you.
with the Kelly Wright Show after this. So welcome to the program. I'm talking to Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He's the president and CEO of the National Newspapers Publishers Association, Black Press USA. And Doc, it's good for you to join us today. This is a very momentous, pivotal day, if you will. It's the first of 3 memorials for George Floyd, the African-American man that all of us witnessed the harrowing and horrible way in which he died with a police officer's knee on his neck. And now those 4 officers have in charge. And as we move forward now, this memorial, what does it mean? What does it say for the country as we try to embrace moving forward in such a way that we can reconcile our differences and stop the madness of violence inflicted upon African Americans?
Well, thank you very much, Kelly. I'm speaking to you live from Los Angeles, California. And of course, the memorial service today that is being held in Minneapolis is a symbol of the whole country having a memorial service from coast to coast, from the West Coast to East Coast, and North and the South. All 50 states have been engaged. And I want to just give a shout out of salute to all of the young people and intergenerational people who have been participating in the protests. Most of the protests have been peaceful. Most of them have been nonviolent. And even in those places where there were some disturbances, I'm told in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, things have become much more peaceful. But one thing is for certain, the name, the life, the legacy, the memory, and the spirit of George Floyd resonates now, not only with Black America, but all people across the United States and all people throughout the world. As you probably have heard and seen, Kelly, that been tens of thousands of people in Paris and other parts of the country, in Africa, in the Caribbean. So this is a global recognition. So the memorial service today, and there'll be another memorial service in Houston the first of the week, where he was actually from, Houston, Texas, symbolize that we still have work to do. We just cannot, in my view, pay our respects in terms of a memorial service and then go back to business as usual. We're very grateful that the Attorney General of Minnesota, Attorney General Keith Ellison, filed the charges now against all four now officers that were involved in the murder of George Floyd are now in jail. And we're looking forward to the prosecution, to the trial, and the conviction of these men who brutally and senselessly took the life of Brother Floyd. And of course, this is going on. And now we find out there are other cases that we're finding out in Florida and other parts of the country that has happened since the murder of George Floyd. So we have a national problem, Kelly. And I think that we, as I've said to you before, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, we still have an epidemic of racially motivated police brutality. So we got work to do. Yeah. But my long days in the civil rights movement, I want just to say to everyone that this is a time for us to strengthen our faith, not weaken our faith. This is a time for us to strengthen our resolve to work together, to bridge the racial divide, to bridge the poverty divide, to bridge the health disparities divide. There are many divisions in our society. And I think it's at times like these that we have to work together, coalesce, build the kind of coalitions that can transform our nation and make our world a better place. I just want to point out, we still have to get the census counted over the next few weeks and months, and we're looking toward the November election. So we have a lot of work to do. And so to me, yes, we paused to pay our spiritual respects and cultural respects to the memory of George Floyd, but we dedicate ourselves and to his family, to the Floyd family, that we're not going to let his death be in vain.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. And I want to hold you over just for a little bit, because when we come back, we want to talk about the protests that are going on in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. And to your point, you know, we've got this epidemic of racial violence, which I now liken to, we have a coronavirus that's also revealed to us our racism virus, and they both must be eradicated. But when we return, I want to talk about another matter. A star athlete, Drew Brees, famed quarterback, destined for the NFL Hall of Fame, and what he had to say about the national anthem and taking a knee, a la Colin Kaepernick. And we're going to come back and talk about Drew Brees and the apology that he's made, because I think healing begins with white America recognizing its wrongs, just as he so, I think, rightly and heroically did. Back with more of Dr. Benjamin Chavis after this. So joining me now, once again, is Dr. Benjamin Chavis, a good friend. He's also the president and CEO of NNPA, Black Press USA. And Doc, Drew Brees is a star quarterback that many people have always cheered for, black and white, brown, yellow, red. They all love him. He's performed some miracles on the field, and he stepped in it and stepped on it yesterday when he was talking about on his Instagram page about the fact that he would not take a knee and really didn't respect that, and he really got pounded for it from his teammates and from other members of the NFL, from people throughout the community. But this is what he did that struck me as a growing grace period, because as grace grows, forgiveness happens, especially when you take accountability and responsibility for your actions. So he apologized for making that statement, and he said this. He said, "This is where I stand. I stand with the Black community in the fight against systemic racism, injustice, and police brutality, and support the creation of a real policy change that will make a difference. I condemn the years of oppression that have taken place throughout our Black communities and still exist today." And then he said something else. I'm reading through this. He says, "I'm sick about the way my comments were perceived yesterday, but I take full responsibility and accountability. I recognize that I should do less talking and more listening. And when the Black community is talking about their pain, we all need to listen." How does that strike you coming from Drew Brees?
Well, it strikes me first as being sincere, honest, and there's a sense of integrity to admit. Drew admitted that he was wrong, but he not only admitted that he was wrong, he went further.
Mm-hmm.
He issued a statement that was consistent with the reality that Black America is facing racism, injustice, oppression, and disparities and inequalities for a long period of time. And so now it's ironic that Drew Brees can not only be a leader now on the football field with a championship team, but he can be a leader now in civil society because his voice resonates. And certainly I think that we should accept his apology. See, it's one thing for people to offer an apology, it's another thing to accept it. And the question now is, how can we move together? I think if all quarterbacks of all of the NFL teams had the guts of a Drew Brees, our society and the football league would also move forward. I know that the NFL now has a dynamic African-American executive vice president. His name is Troy Vincent. And I know he's on top of this. And so we're expecting great things from the NFL to not only advocate for diversity and inclusion, but to practice diversity and inclusion as they not only permit our brothers from our community to play football, but they stand for a symbol of change. So I think all of the institutions, whether it's Major League Football, Major League Baseball, or the NFL, or the NBA, all the professional sports, I think should weigh in in a positive sense. So I see this at the end of the day as something positive, and I think we should accept his apology. But now let's work together, not only to improve the racial climate in New Orleans, but let's improve the racial climate across these United States of America.
You're watching The Kelly Wright Show. I'm talking to Dr. Benjamin Chavis, and we'll be back with more after this. And to your point, when we see corporate leaders and star athletes like Drew Brees coming out and stating that they've been wrong on the issue and they want to get in front of it, what saddens me is that we're seeing these star athletes come forward, these celebrities come forward, and we have not seen the president come forward with conciliatory words and words like we just saw from Drew Brees, wherein you're embracing the Black community rather than causing more division.
Right. Well, again, after all these tragedies, and including the recent tragic police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis and others, the list is so long. We could take up your whole program,
Right.
Kelly, just listen the names of the men, the women, and children who have been murdered as a result of police violence. It would take up the whole show. But I just want to say that I'm still optimistic. I keep being reminded of what Dr. King told us so clearly in the 1960s. And he said that when things get tough, when things get hard, it's important for us not to become hopeless, not to become in a state of fear that things will not change. We should translate our anger, our disgust, yes, our pain and our sorrows into a constructive modus operandi that can affect change in society. And so I see what happened in Minneapolis as a tipping point. And I think the reaction is, if you look at who's in all of the demonstrations, it is Black, it is white, it's Latino, it's Asian, it's Native American. It represents an inclusive movement for change. And when that happens, Kelly, our democracy will change.
Yeah, indeed, we should, and we don't agree with those who have sought to loot and destroy and pillage communities and put hardworking business people out of business. But the bottom line is there are a lot of peaceful protests out there saying, hands up, don't shoot, I can't breathe, and enough is enough. And Dr. Benjamin Chaves, I thank you for being with us today and sharing your insights on this. And before I let you go, you did march with Martin Luther King Jr. You've seen so many things happen in this country. What's different about the tone and tenor of the young people and the older people we're seeing marching together in this particular moment?
Well, the biggest difference is that the marches today are much more multicultural, are much more multilingual, are more diverse. Back in the 1960s, we had a few white people join the march, but it was overwhelmingly Black people. Now we have large numbers of whites, large number of Latinos, large numbers of Asians, large number of also whites joining with Blacks. So I think there has been a growth and an expansion of what Dr. King described as the beloved community, which is an inclusive community representing the oneness of humanity and the oneness of God.
Thank you, sir. Good to talk to you as always. Stay safe in LA. I know you're doing some great things out there. Look forward to hearing more about it when you have the opportunity to tell us. Dr. Benjamin Chaves, right here on the Kelly Wright Show. We're back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. I want to give you my final word. It's a little bit longer. Google has stepped up to actually recognize George Floyd by holding a period of silence in memory of the death of George Floyd and other Black lives that have been lost. The company CEO stated this: "Our Black community is hurting, and many of us are searching for ways to stand up for what we believe and reach out to people we love to show solidarity." Also, Ben Crump stated this: "When we fight for the least of these, we are helping America live up to its creed to be the beacon of hope and justice for the world, helping America be America for all Americans. We don't want two justice systems in America. We endeavor to achieve equal justice for all citizens." So tonight on the Kelly Wright Show, we leave you hopefully righted, ignited, and united to not spread fear, but to spread justice, knowledge, and for George Floyd, love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am alone. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Precious Lord, take my hand and lead me home. Well, lead me, Lord, guide me along the way. For if you lead me, I cannot stray. Precious Lord, take my hand and lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call. Take my hand, lest I fall. Precious Lord, take my hand.